that moment in almost every single coming-of-age movie where the protagonist packs their entire life into the trunk of some battered old car?
Oh, yeah, the classic cinematic trope.
Right. The camera pans out, some atmospheric indie pop anthem starts swelling in the background, and they just drive off toward the glittering skyline of a brand new city.
It's a great visual. Very powerful.
It really is. It always looks so incredibly triumphant, so clean, like they are effortlessly shedding their old skin and stepping into this shiny, fully formed new existence.
Well, it is the ultimate cultural romanticization of the fresh start. The cinematic montage makes it look like pure, unadulterated momentum.
Yeah,
I mean, you get the drive, the beautiful sunset, the keys to the new place, and then an immediate cut to them laughing in a crowded coffee shop.
exactly. But then the movie fades to black, the credits roll, and you're just left wondering what actually happens the next morning.
The messy part.
Yeah, the really messy part. What happens when they wake up on a half-inflated air mattress in a painfully empty, echoing apartment, realize they don't know how the hot water heater works,
Right.
and it suddenly hits them that they don't know a single human being in a 50-mile radius.
Right. That is where the montage ends and the highly complex psychological reality begins. We culturally love the idea of the blank slate. We crave it, honestly.
We really do.
But we severely underestimate how incredibly heavy a blank slate actually is to carry around every day.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We're looking at the foundational elements of a massive life transition today, which is moving to a new city completely alone.
A huge topic.
It is. Our mission for today's deep dive is to explore the anatomy of this specific experience, unpacking why certain emotional and practical pillars like fear, excitement, routine, and connection are universally central to starting over from scratch.
And this is so relevant to anyone who's ever relocated.
Exactly. And I want you, the listener, to think about a time you had to step completely out of your comfort zone and navigate a transition like this.
Because moving isn't just about the physical logistics of, packing boxes or figuring out how to forward your mail.
No, it's way deeper than that.
It is. It's a fundamental ground-up disruption of your environment, your social safety network, and even your neurological habits. It's a massive psychological shift that forces a total recalibration of how you exist in the world.
Right.
And what we're going to do today is synthesize these core themes from our sources to really understand the mechanisms underneath them. Why do these specific feelings inevitably surface, and why do certain strategies actually work to stabilize us?
Well, to get to those strategies, I feel like we have to look at the immediate psychological friction that hits you the second you arrive.
The pendulum swing.
Yes, exactly. There is this overwhelming tension between two incredibly powerful forces. On one side, you have the excitement of discovering a new place, and on the other, the very real fear of being alone.
They hit you simultaneously.
They really do. I was trying to visualize how this actually feels, and the best way I can describe it is imagine you were dropping into a massive open-world video game,
Okay, I'm with you.
but you haven't unlocked any of the map yet. The entire landscape is covered in that, like, fog of war.
Ah, the shroud over the uncharted territory. I like this framing.
Right. Because at first, stepping into the fog of war is incredibly thrilling. You have absolute freedom. You are discovering new terrain, new architecture, new side quests.
The novelty.
Yeah, the sheer novelty of it is intoxicating. You feel like you can reinvent your entire character build. That is the excitement of discovery. But
Then
then
reality sets in.
the reality of the game mechanics sets in. You realize you haven't unlocked any safe zones. You don't have any fast travel points to get back to familiar ground.
You're exposed.
Completely exposed. You have 0 health potions, and you haven't met any companion characters to watch your back. Suddenly, the vastness of the uncharted map isn't a playground anymore. It's an active threat.
That perfectly captures the dual nature of the relocation experience. The transition from the high of absolute autonomy to the crushing weight of vulnerability.
So how does this tension actually operate in our heads? Because I look at that pendulum swinging between the thrill of the blank map and the terror of having no health potions.
Yeah.
And I wonder, do we just burn out on the excitement?
What do you mean?
Like, does the novelty wear off chronologically and then the fear just moves in to replace it? Or are we just constantly bouncing back and forth between feeling like an intrepid explorer and a totally isolated castaway?
Well, what's fascinating here is that we tend to think of fear and excitement as mutually exclusive states. But they aren't.
Really? They are.
No, they're actually two sides of the exact same physiological coin. They don't exist on a clean timeline where one expires and the other takes over.
Interesting.
The entire concept of a new chapter is defined by this constant overlapping interaction. You are perpetually swinging between the high of novelty and the deep evolutionary vulnerability of being untethered.
Let's dig into that evolutionary vulnerability for a second.
Right.
Because I know brains are basically like ancient hardware trying to process modern life.
They absolutely are. Think about the biological inputs when you arrive in a new city. Every single thing is novel.
Everything, the streets, the sounds.
Yeah, the way the streets are laid out, the ambient noise of the traffic, the social norms in the grocery store, it's all brand new data. And biologically, human beings are deeply rewarded by novelty.
It triggers dopamine, right?
Exactly, it triggers dopamine pathways. We are wired to seek out new information because, historically, discovering new resources kept us alive.
So that dopamine hit is the excitement we feel.
Yes, it makes us feel vibrant and present.
The rush of reinvention, the whole I could be anyone in this new zip code feeling.
But the flip side is that you have simultaneously severed all your familiar tethers. Human beings survived evolutionarily by being part of a tribe.
Right. There's safety in numbers.
Yeah. We are obligate social creatures. Our nervous systems literally regulate themselves through connection. So when you move to a new city alone, your brain eventually surveys the landscape and realizes, uh-oh, I don't know who the safe people are.
Oh, wow.
I don't have an emergency contact. If I get sick or if a predator attacks or, in modern terms, if my car breaks down or I lose my job, there is no safety net.
And the brain interprets that lack of a safety net as a literal mortal threat.
It does. It floods your system with cortisol. So you have this incredible friction. You cannot have the genuine thrill of discovering a new frontier without also accepting the inherent biological vulnerability of being a stranger in it.
We fuel each other.
Exactly.
Wow.
The fear makes the discoveries feel hard-won, and the dopamine from the excitement provides the momentum to push through the cortisol-induced isolation.
Which sounds incredibly taxing. I mean, if our brains are constantly ping-ponging between a dopamine rush and a cortisol spike, we are going to redline our internal engines pretty fast.
Oh, absolutely. Exhaustion is a huge part of the process.
So if the pendulum is swinging that wildly, how do we hack the system to slow it down? Because logically, we can't stay in that state of hyperarousal forever.
We can't.
And the sources we're looking at often point to two practical anchors, which are building a routine and making new friends.
Yes. Establishing a framework to manage that overwhelming friction is the only way to make the transition sustainable.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Go for it.
I completely understand the need for friends to calm the nervous system. That makes perfect biological sense based on what you just said. But building a routine...
You don't like the idea of routine.
Well, if moving to a new city is supposed to be this grand adventure, if I just uprooted my entire life to seek out endless discovery, isn't locking myself into a strict routine the exact opposite of what I should be doing?
It feels counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
If I pack up and move to a vibrant, chaotic, endlessly interesting place like Tokyo or New York, the absolute last thing I want to do is figure out how to do the exact same thing every single Tuesday.
Right. You want to explore.
Yeah. It feels like bringing my stale, boring habits into my shiny new existence. Why is routine considered such a vital anchor?
Because you are underestimating the invisible weight of cognitive load.
Cognitive load.
Yes. We tend to associate routine with being stuck in a rut. But in the context of a massive life transition, routine is not the enemy of adventure. It is the battery-saving mode that allows you to actually survive the adventure.
The battery-saving mode. Okay, break that down for me.
Well, the human brain consumes an enormous amount of our daily energy output. In your old city, your cognitive load was remarkably low. You navigated your environment on autopilot.
Oh, sure. I didn't have to think about my commute.
Exactly. You knew the fastest route to work, you knew which aisle the coffee was in at the supermarket, you knew the social dynamics of your friend group. All of that required zero active decision-making.
Right, it's just muscle memory.
But in a new city alone, the fog of war is everywhere. Every single micro-interaction requires conscious, active processing.
Like, which train line do I take?
Yes. Is this neighborhood safe to walk through at night? How does the payment system work at this particular bakery?
Oh, man, yeah. The mental math of just buying a coffee.
If your brain is operating at 100% capacity just to navigate the basic logistics of survival, you will have absolutely zero emotional bandwidth left to enjoy the museum or the architecture or the adventure. You will just be exhausted.
So by building a routine, by deciding that I'm always going to buy my groceries at this specific store on Thursday nights, and I'm always going to get my coffee at this specific cafe on Saturday mornings. I am artificially lowering my cognitive load.
Exactly.
I'm clearing the fog of war in small, manageable patches.
You are automating the mundane so you have the energy for the profound. You carve out little safe zones of predictability in a sea of the unknown. And that automation leads us directly into the second practical anchor, which is connection.
Okay, how so?
Routine and friendship aren't separate steps. They are deeply intertwined mechanisms.
I'm trying to connect those dots.
Yeah.
How does doing my laundry at the same laundromat every Sunday actually help me make friends?
It seems disconnected, right?
It does, because when we think about networking or building a social circle, we usually picture going to mixers, joining a recreational sports league, or just being fiercely, exhaustingly extroverted.
And those active methods work. But they also require a massive amount of that cognitive energy we just talked about. Sociology, however, points to a much more passive and sustainable mechanism for friendship formation.
Which is?
It's built on proximity and repeated, unplanned interactions. It hinges on something called the mere exposure effect.
I'm familiar with the term, but how does it apply to, like, the guy reading a book at the coffee shop?
Well, the mere exposure effect is a psychological phenomenon where people tend to develop a preference for things merely because they are familiar with them.
Okay.
When you build a routine that takes you to the same local spots consistently, you start to become a familiar face in the landscape. You see the same barista, you pass the same person walking their dog in the park every evening.
So at first, they are just background NPCs in your video game.
Exactly. But over time, they become familiar strangers. The brain categorizes them as non-threats.
And the cortisol drops.
The cortisol drops. You might start nodding at each other. Then it's a quick comment about the weather. That repeated low-stakes exposure breeds a foundational sense of safety. It dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for a real connection.
It's essentially the high school biology class phenomenon.
Explain that.
Well, you didn't become best friends with the person sitting next to you because you went to a dedicated friend-making seminar.
Right.
You became friends because the institution forced you to sit at the same lab table every single day for a semester. The routine created the proximity, and the proximity inevitably created the connection.
That is the perfect analogy. When you leave school or leave a highly structured workplace, you lose that institutional proximity. In a new city, you have to engineer it yourself. That is why the routine is so vital. It's about planting yourself in the soil of your new community consistently enough to let roots actually take hold. If you are constantly chasing the novelty of a new venue every single day to feed the adventure...
You never stay still long enough to become a familiar face.
Exactly. You essentially remain a tourist in your own life.
And tourists are inherently unmoored.
Right. But once you establish those routines and those passive connections begin to solidify, the pendulum stops swinging so violently, the fog of war clears, the map is populated with safe zones, and the nervous system can finally relax.
Okay, so we've managed the biology, we've dropped the cognitive load, we've hacked the mere exposure effect to build a tribe, and the panic subsides.
Yes.
But the transition doesn't end there, does it? Because once we survive the physical and emotional reality of the move, we have to figure out how to, actually process it.
This is the integration phase. It's where we move from experiencing the disruption to making meaning out of it.
And here's where it gets really interesting to me. I want to talk about the power of storytelling.
Storytelling is huge here.
It is. When someone asks for advice about a big move or when they reflect on their own relocation, they almost never give a bulleted list of facts.
No, they don't.
They don't say, well, I experienced a spike in cortisol, so I lowered my cognitive load by attending the same cafe until the mere exposure effect yielded a companion.
That would be a very strange conversation.
Super strange.
No.
Right. Instead, we immediately narrativize it. We offer a short personal story. We frame it as starting a new chapter. We focus on a positive, motivating takeaway.
Always.
We say things like, my first week at Chicago, I got completely lost on the L train in the freezing rain, but that's how I ended up finding my favorite diner.
The classic happy accident narrative.
Exactly. But I have to ask, is framing the move as this grand, cohesive new chapter just a psychological coping mechanism?
Take that a step further. What do you mean by a coping mechanism in this context?
Well, the reality of moving is often incredibly messy. It's lonely, it involves a lot of embarrassing mistakes, and it can feel totally random.
Very random, yes.
So are we just putting a neat, tidy narrative bow on a genuinely chaotic disruption of our lives so that we don't feel entirely out of control? Like, are we just tricking ourselves?
It is absolutely a coping mechanism, but I would argue strongly against the idea that we are just tricking ourselves.
Really?
Yes, narrative framing is a profound and necessary psychological tool. It fundamentally alters our reality.
How does telling a story alter the reality of sitting alone in an apartment?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of narrative identity theory, humans do not experience life as a random series of disconnected, chaotic events.
Right.
We experience life as a story in which we are the protagonist. When you undergo a massive transition, like relocating, the sheer volume of setbacks and novel experiences can feel deeply disorienting.
Yeah, I bet.
It can feel like life is simply happening to you. You are a passive victim of circumstances.
Right, you're just getting buffeted around by the new environment.
But when you begin to format those struggles into a structured narrative, when you explicitly frame it as starting a new chapter, you are doing something incredibly powerful.
You're taking back control.
You are taking control of the chaos. You are transitioning from a passive victim of a difficult move to the active author of your own life.
Wow. You become the editor of your own memory.
Precisely. You are engaging in retrospective meaning-making by crafting a personal story with a positive, motivating takeaway. You take the terrifying, isolating moments, getting lost on the train, eating dinner alone for the 10th night in a row, and you assign them a crucial role in your development.
They're not just random anymore.
Right. They are no longer just random instances of suffering. They are the necessary trials and tribulations that the hero must endure in the first act of the story to achieve growth.
So the suffering isn't pointless. It's like character development.
It is character development, and that changes how we communicate our experiences to others. Sharing a motivating personal story serves a vital dual purpose.
What's the dual purpose?
First, it offers genuine comfort to the person embarking on their own move, providing them a blueprint that shows the isolation is survivable.
Right, it helps them.
But secondly, and perhaps more importantly for the speaker, every time we tell that positive story, we are cementing our own resilience.
We are essentially speaking our resilience into existence.
Exactly.
We take all that messy, terrifying data from the emotional pendulum and we spin it into a cohesive identity. We draw a psychological boundary between the old self and the new self, and we literally call it a new chapter.
It is the ultimate synthesis of the relocation experience.
Yep.
The practical anchors of routine and connection help you survive the physical reality of the new city.
But the narrative framing is what allows you to survive and integrate the psychological reality.
That's exactly it.
This has been such a fascinating breakdown of an experience that so many of us go through, but, rarely actually dissect.
It's surprisingly scientific when you look at it.
It really is. So to bring all of these concepts together, moving to a new city alone is essentially a complex three-step psychological dance.
A dance, yes.
First, you have to acknowledge and navigate the emotional pendulum, understanding that the dopamine thrill of discovery and the cortisol-driven fear of isolation are constantly interacting.
Because you cannot have the frontier without the fog of war.
Right. And then, step two, to manage that friction, you have to intentionally drop your cognitive load. Paradoxically, you conquer the adventure by building predictable routines.
Lowering the battery usage.
Yes, saving the battery. You carve out safe zones that create the repeated low-stakes exposure necessary to naturally plant the seeds of community.
You engineer your own proximity.
You engineer your own proximity. I love that. And finally, step three, you take control of the chaos through storytelling. You package the doubts and the small victories into a cohesive narrative, framing it as a new chapter to validate your own resilience and author your own growth.
It's a profound cycle, really. Disruption, stabilization, and then integration.
So for everyone listening right now, I want you to reflect on your own life transitions. When you faced a blank slate, how did your brain handle it?
That's a good question.
Did you lean hard into chasing the novelty to outrun the fear? Or did you immediately start mapping out routines to drop your cognitive load? We all have a slightly different internal balance for managing that pendulum.
And that reflection actually raises an important and somewhat provocative question, a final thought to consider, which kind of flips everything we've just discussed on its head.
Oh, lay it on us. What is it?
Well, we've spent this entire deep dive dissecting the psychological tools required to conquer a new city. The intentional routine building to manage cognitive load, the active pursuit of the mere exposure effect, the conscious framing of a new chapter to foster personal growth.
Right.
But what if we applied those exact same strategies to the city we currently live in?
Oh, wow. That brings up a really interesting contradiction. Because we usually think of our current cities as the places we are trying to escape to find that growth.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because in our current cities, our cognitive load is so low that we are basically sleepwalking. We are completely blind to our own surroundings. We run entirely on autopilot.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're bored.
But what would happen if you woke up tomorrow and decided to treat your hometown like a brand new relocation? What if you actively sought out unfamiliar neighborhoods to establish a fresh routine?
Just to shake things up.
What if you intentionally placed yourself in new environments to organically become a familiar stranger to a totally different demographic,
Yeah.
rather than relying on your established network?
So you could essentially manufacture the dopamine thrill of discovery without having to sever your social tethers or trigger the existential panic.
Exactly. Could we unlock the profound personal growth and excitement of a new chapter simply by changing our psychological posture?
That is mind-blowing. You don't necessarily need a moving truck to initiate a fresh start. You just need the deliberate mindset of a newcomer. That is a brilliant concept to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. It has been an absolute pleasure pulling apart the mechanics of starting over.
It was great being here.
So, next time you see that cinematic montage of the car driving off into the sunset, remember,
Hmm.
the real work and the real growth starts when they have to map out a grocery store the next morning. Keep exploring the world around you, keep questioning your routines, and we will see you on the next deep dive.